The stories that you just heard were taken from real situations. And maybe as you listened, you were reminded of a time in your own life when God brought someone along, and through them he encouraged you, or he restored your hope, or he gave you the strength that you needed to go on. I know that's been part of my situation. And in some of my darkest or my most difficult or my saddest times, he's shown up, usually through somebody from here. And just the sight of their face or an encouraging word or just having them there was all it took to remind me that he loves me and that I'm not alone. But maybe you were reminded of a time when you were the person whose heart God stirred to let him work through you. And like some of what we heard, sometimes there are doubts or hesitations. It's usually because we're not sure what to do. We know we can't take away the pain or change the situation, and we wonder whether our being there really is going to make any difference at all. Sometimes it's just because we're plain afraid to get involved. If we haven't met, let me introduce myself. I'm Janet Cregger, and I've been serving as the care pastor for the last 3 years here at FCF. But if someone would have ever told me that I was going to be in this role, I wouldn't have believed them. When Randy first mentioned the word leader to me, I said, "Oh no, you got the wrong person. That is not me." See, most of my life, I've wrestled with doubts and hesitations about what I could do for God. I mean, there was a time when I was a little kid that I heard someone talking about how Jesus had died for me, and I knew he had done something really special, and I wanted to respond to that in some way. So I talked to my mom, and I talked to my pastor, and I was baptized. But it wasn't until I grew up that I really understood why he did what he did. I mean, he lived his life and suffered and died and returned to life to express the heart of God in the most extreme possible way through his own life and death and his resurrection. He expressed God's love and his compassion. And because of that love and compassion, I wouldn't have to walk through life feeling guilty or ashamed of the wrong things that I had done or things that I would do, even when I wanted to and was trying to do what was right. And when I saw how perfect and powerful God's love and compassion was in my own life, when I caught a glimpse of how amazing God really is, that was it. I was sold. I wanted to do something to show my gratitude to him for everything that he did for me. I wanted to let people know who he was to me and who he wanted to be to them. But I didn't feel like I could adequately express such perfect love and compassion. I mean, I'm a pretty ordinary person. I'm a wife, a mother, a high school graduate. But I ended up around some people who had this dream to express the heart of God to Frederick. And they could speak and they could teach, and I thought maybe if I jumped in there and helped out somehow, I could be part of that. So I started serving. I put together programs, I sent out mailings, I took notes at business meetings, I answered phones. We hosted the meetings and church picnics at our little house. I organized groups of people and scheduled them to serve, to do whatever needed to be done. I worked with every age group from babies all the way to high school. Whenever there was a need or something was happening in someone's life, we took meals or we helped out whatever way we could. A couple of times I even played the keyboard with the band, something that we were all glad I only did a couple of times, especially me. One time I can remember hearing somebody sing and praying this really frustrated prayer. "Oh God, if I just had a voice to speak for you and tell people how amazing you really are. But I can't sing like that, and I can't speak or teach. All I can do is serve and hope that people will see your heart through what I do." And I think that prayer might be part of the reason why I'm speaking today. And now it's my privilege to serve along a group of you who we call our care ministry. They're men and women who work full-time jobs and have busy lives and lots of responsibilities, and yet somehow they find a way to make themselves available to God so that he can express his heart through them. They take meals and help out whatever way they can. They provide one-to-one support. They call and check on families and individuals to see when there's something happening in their life, if there's some way that we as their church family can show our love and our support for them. They mentor couples to rebuild and strengthen their marriages. So far this year, that team of incredible people has helped about 300 other people. And all along the way, on this 20-year journey to where I'm serving right now, I've been filled with doubts and reservations. With every new challenge, I was afraid, and I didn't know how to get it together and make it work and what I could bring to the task. And the reason Pastor Randy asked me to share all this with you today is because we are in this series of messages called What Are You Waiting For? And it's a series about 5 things that God tells us through the Bible that we are created for. 5 critical components that will be part of life if we are spiritually healthy individuals, and part of life if we're a spiritually healthy church. Kim talked a few weeks ago about connecting with community, and last week Randy talked about cultivating our characters to be like the character of Jesus. And today, like Debbie told you, we're talking about caring through ministry. But what I want you to hear from my story isn't about all this stuff that I did. It's not about me at all. What I want you to hear is how in spite of the feelings of inadequacy or the doubts or the hesitations, not knowing what to do or what difference I could make, if we will just jump in and start serving with every new challenge, God will teach us more about who He is and more about what He wants to do through us. And what I really want you to hear today from that story too is that if we're willing just to make ourselves available to Him, He wants to, can, and will work through us to express His heart to other people. But what does it mean to express the heart of God? For the answer to that, let's take a look at these words from 1 John, 4th chapter, the 15th verse. If anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in him and he in God. And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Now let's stop there for a minute. Notice it doesn't say that God has love or it says that God feels love. It says God, by his very nature and his character, he's love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in him. In this way, love is made complete among us so that we have confidence on the day of judgment, because in this world we are like him. And take a look at this verse from 2 Corinthians. You'll probably recognize this when this was our memory verse from just about one series ago. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion. Good job. And the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all of our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves have received from God. Expressing the heart of God means expressing his love and his compassion. Here at FCF, we teach about God's love. We talk about it. We tell people about it. And that's something that we must do. That's how we all learn about it to begin with. But the message is complete whenever we touch people with God's love. Whenever we're present with them, whenever we help out in some small way, it lets them see and feel and experience God's love and compassion. Because caring isn't just the responsibility of some of us. Caring is the privilege of all of us. But how has God chosen to express his love and compassion? Well, the answer to that's pretty simple. If you take a look back at those 2 verses, they say, in this world we are like him. And he comforts us in all of our trouble so we can comfort those in any trouble. God's way of expressing his heart is through us. But why would a perfect, compassionate, loving God choose to express himself through faulted, flawed, ordinary people like me? For the answer to that, we need to look in the book of Ephesians. Take a look at these words. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. This is what we were created for, to do this kind of good work. And if you look at that verse in the King James Version of the Bible, it adds a phrase on to the end where it talks about the good works that God prepared in advance for us to do. It then says that we might walk in them. And I love the imagery of that verse because in my cartoon-like mind, what I see when I hear it is someone walking along and, oh, look what I just stepped in. There's one of those good works that God prepared in advance for me to do. And if we're honest, sometimes that's how it feels. Sometimes we have to muster up the courage and step in there even though we're not sure what difference we could possibly make. Where sometimes we feel like we just stepped into a situation that we weren't expecting to be part of. But God has chosen to do this through us. He's picked us for his team. You remember when you were a kid on the playground and they were picking teams for some kind of a game? Like, what was the thing that nobody wanted to have happen? Yeah, no one wanted to be last pick. That's right. And the high honor was first pick. Well, look at it this way. God has picked you to be on his team, the ultimate team, the dream team, the winning team. That's what we were created for. But carrying through ministry, expressing the heart of God comes with a couple of warnings. Take a look at this one. Warning, expressing the heart of God is going to interrupt your life. You see, this isn't something that we can plan or work into our schedules. As a matter of fact, the need that someone has to understand God's love and compassion usually doesn't come whenever it's convenient to us or easy for us at all. If you think that it does, sit with a young man who has no one in the area except his wife and small child and hear his heart break as he tells you that he just got a phone call from her and she's leaving him for someone else. There was no convenience in that situation. Or stand next to a 13-year-old family member. This is really hard for me. It's very personal. And listen to the EMTs say, I'm sorry, we did everything we could, but we lost her. And the person that they're talking about is her mother. The need that someone has to understand God's love and compassion through us doesn't always come when it's convenient or easy for us. Expressing the heart of God is going to interrupt your life. But is it? Now, I don't mean is it going to interrupt. We already covered that. What I mean is it your life? Is it my life? Do you want to see a challenging reminder? Take a look at these verses from 1 Corinthians. You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. And what that means is that whenever Jesus sacrificed himself, he paid so that I could have God's love and compassion in my life. And he gave me the privilege of being able to pass that on to someone else. It's not my life anymore. I was bought with a price. Something I have to remember when I think I'm too busy or too tired or I'm not sure that I'm ready to step into that situation. But this also comes with a second warning. Take a look at this one. Warning. Expressing the heart of God will allow you to experience him in a way like no other. See, until we step into a situation that's way too big for us to bring anything to it except our ordinary selves, until we sit there with someone and yet somehow see that they were helped, were encouraged, or held up, or they were strengthened from within, and we know that we did nothing out of the ordinary, nothing very special at all. We were just there. Until we see that happen, we don't fully understand who God is and how powerful and amazing he is and how he works in these invisible, mysterious ways inside of our hearts. Until we see that, we cannot fully know and experience who he is and how we work together with him. See, God doesn't just want to work with us individually, though. He wants to work with us as a team, a church, a family. Look at these words from Romans 12:4. As each of us has one body with many members, and the members do not all have the same function, so in Christ, we who are many form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. Have you ever looked around this room on a Sunday morning and thought, everybody in here, we belong to each other? Being a part of a big church doesn't mean being part of something impersonal. What it means is that just like with our physical bodies, when one part gets hurt or one part needs care, the others react and respond to that. So being a part of a big church means that when something happens in the lives of one of us, there should be a big outpouring of God's love and compassion from us to that person. And it doesn't matter whether we know them or whether we recognize their face or whether we have a relationship with them. Look at these words from Jesus, Matthew 5. If you love only those who love you, what reward is there for that? If you're kind only to your friends, how are you different from anyone else? But you are to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And we go back to that first verse that talked about how God lives in the person who believes in his son Jesus and how he lives in us. And we see that partnership, that mingling there. And here again, in this verse, we see how God has worked together with us and how we, again, are supposed to be a representative of him in this world. See, if we can get this idea down of belonging to each other and expressing God's love and compassion here, the level of compassion of this church will grow and grow until I hope that it spills over into the world outside of here, into your homes, into your families, into our schools, into our neighborhoods and our workplaces, until through us God can unleash unprecedented amounts of compassion on a waiting, watching world. God has given us a special mission and a unique identity as a family. Listen to this verse from 1 Peter. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. You were not a people, but now you are the people of God. There's that special identity he's given us to express his heart. In 1991, a group of 23 people set out on a mission to express the heart of God to the people of Frederick. They ranged in age from 25 to about 40. There were single adults, couples, and families. Among the families, they had about 15 children, all under the age of 12. In that group, there was a baker, there was some surveyors, there were some teachers, there was a pastor, there were some stay-at-home moms, a bricklayer, and I think a prison guard. They were busy people who had busy lives and responsibilities and families to care for. But they made the decision to make themselves available to God. And that was the start of FCF Church. That group of people got together every night after they worked their full-time jobs or cared for their families, and they went into this little office space in downtown Frederick, and they made phone calls asking if anybody would like information about a new church that was starting in Frederick, a church with the vision to express the heart of God, our vision statement still today. And do you know how many lives that God has impacted through just that little group of 23 very ordinary people? I wish I could tell you. I really don't know either. But I wish I knew. I really do. But the reason we don't know is because it's impossible to count the effects of that, of what God has done through them. And were you at the picnic back in September? Yeah? I was there too, and as I sat there under those tents and I looked at all those people, all I could think was, wow, if God impacted all of these lives to this point from just that 23, what more could he do if all of us could come together and grab onto this idea of belonging to each other and expressing the heart of God? How much more could he do? The heart of God aches, wanting every person to know his love and his compassion, so they don't have to walk through a dark and an ugly sometimes and a difficult world alone. And he has chosen to do that through us. So now what? Now what are we going to do about it? Look at this story from Isaiah. In the 6th chapter of Isaiah, we learn that Isaiah found himself in the very presence of God. Read the rest of it on your own sometime beside the verse that we're focusing on today. It's really a cool picture. He describes the creatures that are around God's throne, and he describes what he hears them saying to God. And then he tells us that his reaction was, whoa, I do not belong here. I am a man with, and he calls himself a man with unclean lips from an unclean people. And God comes along and does something symbolically to show that he's forgiven that, just like he's done for us. And then Isaiah says this. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And I said, Isaiah stepped up and said, here I am, send me. 2 Chronicles 16 tells us that the eyes of the Lord range throughout the whole earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. In just a minute, you're going to hear a song that challenges us to think about what life would be like if Jesus would live and express the heart of God through each one of us. And while that song's playing, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. The first thing is I'm going to ask you to allow God to speak to you about how he wants to express his heart through you and through your life. Let him do that. Ask him to do that. And so that this is an uninterrupted time, it's distraction-free, so that you can really get together with God during this time, we're going to ask everyone to please stay here with us so that there are no interruptions. And then the other thing I'm going to ask you to do is write down what you think that he's telling you on that communication card inside your program so that you can share that with me and I can share it with our staff. Because we know that you could have this conversation in the privacy of your own mind and heart with God, but we also know that when you take a step to share that with somebody else, you're much more likely to follow through on what God has said to you today. Now, I don't know what he's going to say. Maybe for some of you, he's going to ask you for the first time to accept his love and his compassion in your own life. And he's going to ask you to walk with him through the rest of your life. If that's what he's saying to your heart today, then write that down. Maybe he's stirring the hearts of some of you to want to be part of the care ministry. There's a little pamphlet with your program today that tells all the things that the care ministry does. Maybe as you hear the song and you look through that, there's going to be something there that stirs your heart specifically. Write that down. Or maybe it's going to be like my story. You know, maybe you're not going to know exactly what you should do, but you just need to jump in there and start somewhere. And so you can just write care ministry and we will help you find a place where you can get started in that. Maybe he's going to ask you to serve on Team Orange and hold a baby or sit and express God's love by talking to an elementary school or middle school or high school student. Or maybe he's going to ask you to serve a cup of coffee, or he's going to ask you to come in here on Sunday morning and get this thing going of belonging to each other by just saying hi to everybody sitting around you every week. Wouldn't that be a great first step? There are a million things that you can do to express the heart of God, and a million things that he can do through you if you'll just let him. I don't know what he's going to say to you today. And if the answer doesn't come today and it comes a few days from now or a week from now, then send us an email and tell us. As the eyes of the Lord range throughout the whole earth, seeking to strengthen those whose hearts are fully devoted to him, I hope that he finds yours and mine among those today. And just like with Isaiah, when the call goes out, who can I send and who will go for me? I hope you'll step up and say, Lord, in spite of my doubts and my reservations, here I am. Send me.